Nuestra guerra contra las pandillas no tuvo una tan sola baja civil.
As of today, our war against the gangs has not had a single civilian casualty. I don't know how to explain it other than to say it was the hand of God.
Nayib Bukele is carefully cultivating friends among powerful Republicans in Donald Trump's Washington. And in recent weeks, he put that relationship on full display. That was him speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast in San Salvador on January 19th, attended by members of the U.S. Congress from both parties. He was describing how he received proof of God's existence. He didn't mention that hundreds of people have died in the regime's prisons alone since he installed the state of exception almost 4 years ago, or that police have arrested thousands of innocents by his government's own admission. I'm Roman Gracia, the editor of Faro English, and this is our weekly podcast, Central America in Minutes.
In Nicaragua, the house arrest of Daniel Ortega's brother
relates more to El Salvador and Honduras than to Guatemala. In the case of Guatemala,
globalism comes to die at CPAC, but in El Salvador, it's already dead.
Central America in Minutes, an original podcast by El Faro English.
On Wednesday, El Salvador became the 27th member of the Board of Peace, designed by Trump to sidestep the UN and oversee plans for the Gaza Strip, alienating some traditional U.S. allies. Bukele is of Palestinian descent, and as president, El Faro reporting has shown his personal ties to the Israeli spyware industry. This has been the week that keeps on giving. On Thursday, the United States and El Salvador announced a new reciprocal trade agreement building on CAFTA, which is, of course, still in force. But that hasn't stopped Bukele from marketing it as, quote, the first reciprocal trade agreement in the entire Western Hemisphere. The actual text of the agreement is hardly reciprocal. It states that the U.S. will waive tariffs on certain Salvadoran imports. The U.S. Trade Representative says that this chiefly includes textiles and apparel products. El Salvador has a dollarized economy and buys much more than it sells, running a significant deficit with the United States. The U.S. textile industry, which runs maquilas in El Salvador, claims the deal will support hundreds of thousands of jobs. According to Salvadoran Economy Minister Maria Luisa Hayem, it means a 10% U.S. tariff has been removed. But it was a tariff that Trump himself imposed in April of last year on so-called Liberation Day. And most of the new trade framework is a long list of what Trump will get in return, to the tune of El Salvador shall. For example, Bukele shall allow the U.S. to explore, mine, refine, and export critical minerals and energy resources. The treaty also bans Salvadoran state-owned or controlled enterprises from subsidizing Salvadoran good producers. It also calls on El Salvador to join the United States in imposing tariffs on third countries. Article 5.2 states, if the United States determines that El Salvador is cooperating to address shared national and economic security issues, the United States may take such cooperation into account in administering its laws and regulations. For Bukele, the deal is a feather in his cap with Washington. And the same goes for Trump. The U.S. Trade Representative described it as part of his global efforts to, quote, liberate America from unfair trade practices. For more on what they really want from each other, read our December essay, Bukele in the Shadow of Trump. All right, pause. Do you work at a radio station? Every week, we explain what's really happening in our region. We cut through the noise. Shout out, by the way, to our friends at KEPW in Eugene, Oregon. To put Central America on the airwaves, shoot us an email at english@elfaro.net. In Honduras, President Tito Asfura took office on Tuesday on promises of eliminating 36 institutions, saving hundreds of millions of dollars. Spending will prioritize the public debt, health, education, and infrastructure. On Thursday, he made waves by asking that Honduras rejoin the World Bank's International Investment Dispute Forum. The Xiomara Castro administration withdrew in August 2024, while Honduras faced claims totaling $12 billion. This happens when a company argues that a state has violated its rights and affected its bottom line in that country. The vast majority of the money on the line was demanded by Prospera, a Delaware-based Bitcoin-using charter city. Xiomara Castro had pulled their licenses, along with other special zones for economic development known as ZEDES, installed in Honduras under Juan Orlando Hernández. Which brings us to Asfura's cabinet. Foreign Minister Mireya Agüero served from 2013 to 2014 under National Party presidents Pepe Lobo and Juan Orlando. Finance Minister Emilio Hercules held posts tied to finance and transparency in the Hernández and Xiomara Castro years. He says the new EU ambassador has offered credit lines totaling $700 million toward infrastructure. Meanwhile, Asfura has already extended a tax exemption for imports sent to him by Congress. The business association COEP called for the extension. Honduran businessmen are a key point of contact with the United States, meeting with State Department brass just days before Trump endorsed Asfura for the presidency. With such a loud voice from the White House and still dogged by a corruption probe dating back to his time as mayor of Tegucigalpa, Asfura is playing up his old-school conservatism and promising an end to division, vengeance, and quote-unquote ideologies. Even though in its first act in control of Congress, the National Party put the International Pro-Life banner next to the Honduran flag and proposed Bible readings in schools. Just a few weeks ago, Libre, the outgoing ruling party, was still using a social media hashtag, No Volverán, they won't return, with a rat emoji. Now that the opposition has returned, the head of Libre, Mel Zelaya, left the presidential palace with a message, quote-unquote, authorizing his party legislators to attend inauguration. Volveremos, he wrote. We'll be back. Okay, one more shameless plug. Do you get our newsletter in your inbox? Go to elfaro.net/en and subscribe to help us topple the dictatorship of the algorithm. Last, we turn to Nicaragua. On Sunday, Spain and Nicaragua expelled each other's ambassadors. Spain announced that it had, quote-unquote, applied reciprocity, which is diplomat speak for they did so because Nicaragua did it first. The Spanish ambassador, Sergio Farrés Salva, had been in the country for only 2 months. As digital outlet Confidencial reports, the Spanish ambassador and his deputy were expelled after meeting in Managua with 8 aid workers from their own country. They too were expelled. State media has held its tongue on the matter. According to sources consulted by Confidencial, the regime claimed the ambassador, quote, overstepped his authority, but didn't say how. It's not lost on Rosario Murillo or Daniel Ortega that Spain offered citizenship to hundreds of former political prisoners expelled from Nicaragua over the last 3 years. The dissidents were stripped of their citizenship by Sandinista authorities, but received a lackluster reception in the United States, so Spain was a worthy option for some. In the last 2 years, Nicaragua has abandoned a number of international forums tied to the UN. In 2024, they gave the boot to the Food and Agriculture Organization for including Nicaragua in a report on global hunger, calling it interventionist. While stripping the nationality of hundreds of exiles, the regime regularly bars others from entry and withholds the passports of family members still in the country. Just 2 weeks ago, Murillo and Ortega outlawed dual citizenship. Nicaraguans will now be stripped of citizenship upon acquiring another. In Nicaragua, there's no end in sight for passport repression. Thanks for streaming Central American Minutes. I wrote today's episode with sound design by Omnian and support from the Canada Fund for Local Initiatives. Find us wherever you do your streaming, and we'll be back next week. Hasta pronto.